We'll move on, Keith, and we can talk about Leeds United. Now, of course, they announced a new Red Bull deal as shirt sponsors and potentially minority investors too. Bit of a surprise to many. How big of a news, Keith? I'll do that again. Keith, we're going to move on and talk about Leeds United. Now, of course, there was some breaking news that they're going to have a new front of shirt sponsor. Red Bull are stepping in as minority investors as well. How big of a deal, Keith, is that for the Championship club for next season?
Well, this one really did surprise me to a degree, and I'll go on to explain why. But financially, I don't know how big it will be. Obviously, it can't, it won't affect the debts already in place for this last season. Going forward, it may assist to a degree in the PSR situation. But what really intrigues me about this is now we've seen Leeds, obviously with the 49ers, bring in. Will Ferrell's come in as a minority investor. They've got a number of golfers, etc., that have come in there. And now Red Bull is a minority investor. Now, that smacks to me of creating a bit of a problem because you're starting to get too many voices, too many cooks in the kitchen. And in particular, I would say that Red Bull have probably got more experience than the 49ers in terms of running football clubs. And so there could well be an issue with conflict in terms of making some key decisions going forward. When these things start off, it always seems that everybody's very harmonious, everybody's very friendly, and everybody thinks they can all do great things together until there are some decisions that they differ on. And as I say, Red Bull have got some serious experience in running the clubs that they've done so far. And I know for many, many years, they've had people like Gerard Houllier involved as director of football, etc. They've got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. And I think there may well be potentially some conflict down the road. It is not easy when you've got strong minority partners with experience. It's okay to have people coming in for their ego and their sports, reputation, like the golfers, etc. But when you've got serious people coming in with that sort of knowledge who think things could be done a different way, it'll be a hard bunch to handle. And so I think that's where I see some storm clouds gathering for Leeds during the season. Now, of course, as I say, right now, everybody will think, no, that will never happen. It's all going to be fine. It's going to be rosy. But I do, I've been around it and I've seen conflict happen, particularly when the pressure comes about getting Leeds back up to the Premiership, which is what Red Bull and, of course, the 49ers want. But there's now a lot of voices. And in football, the one thing I've always learned is that the fewer voices as possible in decision-making, the better. It should really be, in my own time at Everton, there was myself, Moyes and Kenwright. Three of us made decisions, and that was quick, it was decisive, and it paid dividends. Now you're getting to all these different groups who've got their own, enough knowledge of football to have a view. It's going to be a hard choir to conduct. And so I wish Paragnathi, at Leeds, all the best, but it's going to be a tough one.
Keith, we pick up on that then and sort of wind it back. I mean, many people don't feel that they'll become Red Bull Leeds. I don't think that's necessarily in the conversation. But do you feel sort of suggesting in that then that they might look to effectively potentially in the long term sort of buy the ownership from the 49ers, potentially take it from them into their own hands? Where do you see that potentially playing out then?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It won't never be Red Bull Leeds. I think the colour red for Leeds would be a bit of a problem. Certainly for the Leeds fans, it would be a bit of a problem. And I do think, though, that as I'm saying, that Red Bull could potentially become another, takeover target, or sort of another potential takeover buyer of the 49ers position if things aren't going well. So you've got two very strong groups there, and that doesn't normally bode well. As I say, hopefully it starts off well and it goes well, but I've got enough experience to know that things can break up pretty quickly.
For looking at a positive perspective, Keith, for the Leeds fans, does the Red Bull deal sort of calm some of their fears, though, over that PSR breach, knowing that there will be an influx of cash coming in? Is that then a bonus for them potentially with some of the sort of concerns about selling players going into the June 30th deadline?
Well, until we know the details of the deal, which I don't believe we're going to be told, it's hard to say if there's much, a lot of cash changed hands. It seems to be equity as much as anything else, and certainly, shirt rights and potentially some sort of other sponsorships. I just don't know how much cash will actually filter through to the bottom line for Leeds. You'd hope that would have been part of the deal, but Leeds have got some pretty big numbers already on past player debts that they still owe. And so they're going to be sailing pretty close to the wind. They're going to have to do some divestments, as we've discussed before. and that will be the main thing for them, I think, to cover PSR. I don't think the Red Bull issue is the way to save them. It's probably a bigger structural issue than just the PSR one.
So, I mean, Keith, we discussed before Wilfred Nonto, Archie Gray, Cree Somerville. Are we still expecting some of those big stars to go then going into the summer, particularly with this deadline approaching?
Yes, I think we are. And even, Archie Gray, who is obviously Leeds through and through, he's been linked with a couple of clubs. So, yeah, I do expect to see their big names going. And they're going to have to put together a strong championship squad. I think they can still do it. Leeds is a big club, as we know, and they can always challenge at the championship. But it's not easy, as they've just seen. And I do expect those names to be going, though. And I think that's where the PSR issue will have to be solved.
I mean, from an incomings perspective, you kind of mentioned it in there about sort of building a championship squad. And again, we don't know necessarily about this Red Bull deal, but do we expect them to invest heavily, Keith, in the summer to sort of boost their promotion push for next season, try and get automatics or through the playoffs? Are we likely to see some big signings at Ellen Road?
I don't think big signings, but I think they'll find good championship signings. I think, there's a whole different thing between building a squad for the championship and getting up than it is building a squad to get up to the Premiership and stay in the Premiership. There's two different things there. And then you've got to build the third step of pushing on once you're in the Premiership. But right now, they've got to build that squad to get out of the Championship. They were very close, as we all know, last year. I think Daniel Farke is going to do it again. But, they may be happy to divest themselves of some of the stars, get the PSR issues resolved, but then bring in championship players, which may not necessarily mean big money. But there are certain quality, a certain style, a certain type of experience that's needed. And it's a very, very tough league, as we all know. And that's what Leeds have got to try and build, is this machine to get through the championship, which is a very, very hard slog.
And Keith, to kind of wrap up on Leeds from that PSR breach perspective, if they are to sort of fall foul of the rules, what sort of a sanction could we be talking, particularly in a league that, as you kind of mentioned there, is just so hard to get out of?
Well, again, it's points, and that could be the big issue. I mean, we saw how close the championship was last year. Points again are going to be at a premium, so it can happen that clubs can run away with automatic promotion. We've seen it with Burnley and a couple of times. Norwich did it once. Look, it's going to be tough, but certainly it's got to be in the back of their minds. And I think that Angus Kinnear, the CEO, will be working extra hard with his chief financial officer to make sure the PSR situation is resolved, because every point could be crucial.